Yeah, no worries.
All right. Let's do this, Bruce. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal. And I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing today?
Excellent. The trade we were talking about last night came to pass. The Oilers acquired a center. And the centers, we had talked about two centers in great detail last night, Adam Henrique and from Washington, Nick Dowd. And I mean, it's not like insiders hadn't been talking. I'm not saying we're insiders or anything. But we had come to the conclusion, I think, both of us, if I'm not mistaken, that a center was the way to go, that they needed to acquire some centers. And that's where they should expend their draft capital, mainly because what they needed most, a top four defenseman, wasn't available on the market. That's what I really believe, Bruce. I think if there had been a top four D-man on the market, like they tried to get Tanev, right? That was their first choice. But they went to plan B when Tanev got off the market. And I don't think there's anyone else that would require a first-round draft pick. Do they have a second this year?
I
don't guess. I'll look it up in a second.
Yeah.
Anyway, they still might do more trades, but we'll talk about that in a second. The trade they did do, Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick from Anaheim to Edmonton for a first pick and a fifth pick, and Edmonton also gets a seventh pick. In that first pick is the value also of half the retention of his contract, which is for the rest of the year. And the Oilers also traded a fourth pick this year to the Tampa Bay Lightning for them to retain 25% of just Henrique's contract, or
just
Carrick's
Henrique's.
Well. Henrique's. So Anaheim retained both on Carrick and on Henrique. So that's really good news, Bruce. I've been out this afternoon. Did you figure out how much cap space they might have left?
Yeah. And Puckpedia did a much more thorough job than I did.
They are very trustworthy.
And as of today, they have 1.16 million. And if they wait till Friday, that goes up to, I think it was 1.22 million. And just let me bring up the actual.
So if they got half retention on.
Yeah, they can fit 1.16 annual cap hit today, or 1.22 on Friday. And if they got a player at half retention, they could add a $2.4 million player without sending anything out. This includes Sam Gagner going to the minors, which Ken Holland said he would. And so they still have room to maneuver. And of course, if they trade a contract out or send another guy down, that would add to the potential cap space of the guy they bring in.
But they brought in two players. Do they have to send any? Do you think they're going to be sending anyone down other than Gagner? So Gagner was the extra forward, essentially. Yep. And now, let's say, for arguments, just to make this argument easy, Sam Carrick's the extra forward, and Henrique comes in, though, and has to play. He's going to take someone out of the lineup. Let's say both Carrick and Henrique play. They're both going to play. So two players are going to be sitting. Now, do you think one of those players will be sent to the minors?
If they need to. They certainly have that option. But they would have to waive the guy the day before, like they did with Gagner.
So who could they do that with? The only player they could send down was Holloway.
Don't need to waive is Holloway.
Yeah.
And they could send him out at a moment's notice, even as a paper transaction, while they were waiving somebody else.
Yeah.
So I think they will. So right now, as the roster stands right at this minute, they have 14 forwards and 6 defensemen.
Yeah.
So they could add another defenseman and still be within the 23-man limit.
Yeah. So what do you think of the trade, Bruce?
I'm generally happy with it. I think they addressed a position in need. They got I think a super solid player in Adam Henrique, who's like a sort of older version of Ryan Nugent-Hopkins in the sense that he can do a lot of things. He can play center, he can play wing, he can kill penalties, he can play power play. He's been around the block a few times, and he's been a consistent 40 to 50 point scorer for basically his entire career, which is almost equally split between New Jersey and Anaheim, where he was traded during the 2017-18 season. He's pretty good on the faceoffs. He's on Anaheim, he and Carrick were the top two guys on the team for shorthanded ice time. So clearly they're experienced and relied on penalty killers, mind you, on a bad team. But he's been doing it for a long time on the penalty kill. His career, he's got 16 shorthanded goals and 32 shorthanded points, which ranks him fourth among active players for players since he broke into the league, actually third among active players. He's behind Brad Marchand, Jean-Gabriel Pageau, and the recently retired Patrice Bergeron, all three of whom are elite penalty killers. And so he's a threat to score shorthanded. Now that's secondary to actually killing the darn penalty, but it's nice to have that threat. Those numbers do tell us that he's been penalty killing for a long time. You don't get, he's been a regular on PK units probably his whole career. I haven't looked up year by year exactly his PK splits of ice time, but he's been a regular sort of 17 to 18 minutes a night player throughout, and he's still right in there now at recently turned 34 years old. And his cap hit, which was a little over $5.8 million, has been quartered to just a little under $1.5 million. So it's much more. It fits a lot more nicely. And the fact that they got a third team involved, Tampa Bay Lightning, and to whom they paid an additional fourth round pick to the ones that you already mentioned, to take a quarter of that cap hit means they're still open for business, basically, right now.
So I was just checking their face-off stats, Bruce, and both of them, Carrick and Henrique, are above 50% this year. And Henrique in the defensive zone, which would include a lot of shorthanded face-offs. It's not broken down on NHL.com that I saw, at least when where I was looking, that whether it was shorthanded face-off wins, but he is above 50% for defensive zone face-offs wins. Carrick's right close, like just a few ticks off 50% of his defensive zone face-off draws. So that's excellent. They were looking for people who could do that specific thing. It's an important thing. But the most important thing is the one thing I can't really talk about with these two players. I really think that the most important thing for second, like almost any center, like obviously if they're elite scorers, that's fantastic. After that, though, the most important thing is how do they handle their defensive responsibilities in the defensive slot, especially. Are they effective, conscientious, aggressive, capable in that role? And it's not something that we've seen in the last 15 years. A lot of players on the Edmonton Oilers actually who are. We've seen some who are, and Connor McDavid has become that player. Derek Ryan, I think, has become that player. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins this year, when I looked a little more closely, he's doing okay. He's hanging in there in the defensive slot. But what I don't know, and it would only be through reputation that we can speak to their defensive play. But that's something that people thought Kyle Turris, for instance, was going to be a good defensive center. He was going to come in and be the third center, and he just flopped totally. So I'm hoping Henrique is a lot better at that. The fact that he's still killing penalties, as is Carrick. Carrick scores so little. His even strength scoring is about as low as anyone not named Connor Brown in the NHL for the last two seasons. Henrique's even strength scoring, Bruce, is really, really not that bad at all. It's at the same level as Elias Lindholm points per 60 bases for 5-on-5 play. They're both around 1.8 points per 60 minutes of even strength play. And it's not, he's not that much below, his 1.8 is not that much below players like, let me just see here. Gensel's at 2.1. Adam Henrique is at actually 1.89, if you round it up 1.9. We've got Jordan Eberle 2.1, Nick Dowd 1.8, Pavel Buchnevich 2.2, Tyler Toffoli 2.2, and of course Warren Foegele's at 2.2 as well. And after my rant last night on the podcast about like who the hell is spreading these rumors, I dug into it and I looked into it, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Sure.
This guy Henrique, for the last 2 years, has been scoring at a really decent clip. He's still killing penalties. He's winning faceoffs. They gave up a lot though to get him. Now Tarasenko was traded today, and what was he? Essentially, was it a third round draft pick?
Second and a third?
Tarasenko, let me just find it here.
It was the second and a third.
Okay. Fourth and a third for Tarasenko with half retention. And Vegas got Mantha for a second and a fourth with half retention. So they didn't give up first round draft picks to get what they were looking for in Tarasenko and Mantha. They gave up a third for Tarasenko, who scores at a higher rate than Henrique. But Tarasenko's defense, I'm not so sure about. And Mantha's defense, they gave up a second for him, but I'm not so sure. I think Henrique it's a possibility that he's just a much better all-around player and a far superior defensive player at a really key position to the Edmonton Oilers. And the reason center's so important to the Oilers is, as you were arguing quite eloquently for last night, there might be a reason to stick with McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman this year in the playoffs. It's just so damn hard to score in the NHL right now. You really might need to stack a line if you're hoping to get some even strength production. And I think that there's a better than 50% chance that on opening night of the playoffs, McDavid and Draisaitl are going to be together. I actually think that's where they're going to go, Bruce. So they needed to bring in more people who can play center. They just couldn't rely on Nugent Hopkins and McLeod and Derek Ryan and Dylan Holloway. I think Ryan McLeod is a good defensive center, but I'm not so sure about Nugent in the playoffs or about Ryan or Holloway in the playoffs playing center. They needed to upgrade, and I think they did that. So I'm glad about this trade with that in mind.
Yeah, well, you mentioned faceoffs. What you need at NHL.com is not faceoffs, wins and losses. There's a second one called faceoff percentages, and that does break down special teams faceoffs.
Oh, it does. Good.
Yeah, and for Anaheim, Carrick took the most faceoffs on the team with 195 killing penalties, and Henrique was second with 175, and everybody else on the team combined had 72. So I mean, these guys were their 1-2 guys taking faceoffs on the penalty kill. Carrick was actually slightly over 50%, and Henrique around 46%, and that's 46 is right around normal on penalty kill. The power play team typically wins 54-55% of faceoffs because they have more winger support, with the extra skater. They got a guy who can jump in and help the center win a draw more often. So the power play, it's not a 50-50 proposition. So 50% on PK is really good, and that's where Carrick is at. So they really relied on those guys a lot, and they're both 51 for the season for Carrick and 53 for Henrique. So add them to what the Oilers already have in Draisaitl, who's pushing 55 or 56. Let me just bring up the Oilers now. That same page, and you have Draisaitl at 57, McDavid at 51, McLeod at 50. This is overall. Ryan at 55, and Nugent Hopkins still the weak link at 47. But now they got most of the guys on the team that take faceoffs are over 50%. So that's some nice depth there for sure.
More context, Bruce, on the points per 60 stuff, and what what they cost. So another center was actually traded today. And I think that's probably, or actually two centers were traded. Let me just, Casey Middlestad. My jaw just dropped when I looked at, my jaw just dropped when I saw the trade that Colorado made. They traded Bowen Byram for Middlestad. Bowen Byram.
No,
I mean, I haven't watched him this year, but Bowen, isn't he really a
He was a hot shot, 4th overall pick, but Middlestad was similarly, well, not quite as high, but a very highly rated junior that's taken a little time to emerge in the NHL, but he's been having a pretty good season in Buffalo, I believe.
Anyway, the player I was going to mention was another center, Wenberg. Alexander Wenberg was traded from Seattle to the Rangers. And Wenberg's, again, Henrique's point per 60 is 1.9 points per 60, which is about second line center.
Yeah.
Wenberg's at 1.4 points per 60. And he got a second round draft pick. And I think there's a considerable distance between Wenberg and Henrique. So the first, with that amount of retention,
2 players.
And 2 players, they got Carrick as well. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some people who are disappointed that the Oilers didn't get Jake Gensel or Pavel Buchnevich for the first round pick, but it looks like, when you look at the Wenberg trade, and when you look at what Casey Middlestad's a center, right? Is he not? Am I mistaken about that? I think he's a center. Let's just have a look here. And
I believe he can play the position, yes.
So centers, Bowen Byram is not a small cost, Bruce.
Yeah, no kidding.
And they must have a lot of faith in that. Well, who do they have?
Yeah, he's a center, and he's about a 45 to 47% guy, Middlestad.
Yeah, he's taking more faceoffs.
He's got 47 points in 62 games with Buffalo this year, plus 12 with Buffalo this year, which is a step. He's always been a unhealthy minus player until now. So he's taken a step forward. If that figure can be taken at face value, I'd have to look 5-on-5.
He's 47% on the dot this year, yeah. So he's kind of like a Nugent Hopkins kind of player, perhaps.
Yeah, he's a dynamic, exciting player, and I mean he'll be a nice fit in Colorado. But I kind of wonder about their defense. They went and got Sean Walker, who was rumored to be coming here to Edmonton.
Yeah.
So they traded Ryan Johansson, and his big fat contract went out to bring in Sean Walker, and it was and then they turned around and traded a defenseman for a forward. So they wound up basically trading, center for center and D-man for D-man. They just changed up.
I guess they still have Cale Makar and Devon Toews, right? They still have two of the 10 best defensemen in the NHL, probably the best defenseman in Cale Makar. I would argue. I think he's the best defenseman. I would take him over any other defenseman.
The best pairing, eh?
And Devon Toews is a fantastic hockey player, man. That was one of the all-time heists of this decade, was getting Devon Toews. But so Bowen Byram had 20 points in 55 games. I'd imagine he's not getting much time on the power play there. They still have Josh Manson. They have Samuel Girard, but is he not in some kind of drug rehab thing?
I'm not sure of his current status. I remember he did go into the player assistance program for, I'm not sure what the reason was at some point, but oftentimes it's some kind of substance.
They have a young player called Sam Malinsky. Malinsky, I don't know, Caleb, and they've got Caleb Jones too.
Ooh. So
yeah, so I'm liking the trade, Bruce. Just, again, with the proviso that I don't really have a credible opinion because I've not watched Henrique and Carrick closely enough to be able to assess their, what their value is.
I've watched Henrique enough over the years to be impressed that he's a pretty good all-round player. And I'm 100% convinced the Oilers are better now than they were this morning because they brought in, a real solid all-around player. I mean, Holland, one of the things he talked about, well, three of the things that he talked about at his press conference was penalty killing, depth, and centers. And both guys check all three of those boxes. You know, like they both are regular penalty killers. They both play center, and they both, add to the depth on the team. So Holland, in his usual Holland speak, he was talking about how he wanted to address all of those issues, and clearly he did. And now, I mean, the Oilers have got so many guys that can play center or wing now. I mean, they could, put out a line of 3 forwards, and they could switch positions at every face-off, and they'd still be good to go, because they got was at least now 7 guys that take a lot of draws, counting McDavid, Draisaitl, McLeod, Nugent Hopkins, Ryan, and now the 2 new guys.
Samuel Girard's been playing steadily since December 31st. Okay. There was a 6-week gap in his season from November 18th to December 31st. And so I can't completely recall, but anyway, what happened, but I thought there might have been something along those lines. Bruce, what do you think the Oilers will do next? Do you think that they're done, or what's going to happen next?
I do not think that they're done. Holland, he was a little bit coy when they asked him, and he said, he'll continue making phone calls right up to the deadline. And they asked him about defensemen, and he said, well, we'd like to address depth on defense, but it depends what the price tag is. We're not going to give away the farm. But given the way today's deals were structured, especially to bring in a third team to retain, and they have 1.2 million in cap, which, effectively could be doubled or more if they move a different player out. That allows them to bring in at least one depth D-man. And in theory, they could bring in some guy who's, maybe hits a little higher up the batting order. And what they don't have to do is trade Cody Ceci or Brett Kulak to bring this guy in. So it's not like you're going to go from 6 veteran D-men to 6 veteran D-men. You can bring a guy on and actually add depth. And if it introduces competition and guys that are currently, in rotation get bumped down a notch because the new guy's better, well, that's great. But at minimum, I would think Holland would want to have at least one extra defenseman. He talked repeatedly about needing to play right into June and how you have to expect, even if you can't really plan for injuries, that you're going to, need replacements to come into the lineup. And right now, I mean, he's got Philip Broberg in the minors as his number 7. And then who the hell else have they got, right? They got Ben Gleason in his 4 NHL games, and they got, Markus Niemelainen in his 43 NHL games. And the one guy, Dineen, I think he had a chunk of a season up here, Cam Dineen.
Cam's played 1 or 2 games, eh?
Yeah, how many of these guys do you want to say, well, in the playoffs, we'd be perfectly okay with this guy coming in and playing 14 minutes a night on the third pairing? And how many of the guys, I think the guys on the team, they're pretty comfortable now. Like I noticed Desharnais' ice minutes are continuing to progress northwards, and I don't think they have any players in the 6 that they're sheltering particularly. But as soon as one, in the situation where one of those guys goes down, already you're sort of up against it. And I'd be shocked if they don't add every deadline since he was here. This is the first time Holland didn't add a defenseman first. It was his first move 4 years in a row. Was to bring on a
Green,
veteran D-man,
and then Dmitry Kulikov.
Yeah,
and then who?
Brett Kulak.
Brett Kulak, and then Matthias Ekholm.
Yeah.
The last 2 acquisitions are pretty good acquisitions.
They're still here, yeah.
Yeah, Kulak's
playing well. Good, eh?
He really is. He took himself. I know that. So both Kulak and Foegele have been listed for some time on trade boards as players who might be moved out for salary cap reasons. And it just became increasingly making less and less sense, to the point where, like, but Bruce, a lot of people were still thinking Foegele might be moved out. He was still on the daily Faceoff. He still is on the daily Faceoff on TSN trade board. And I heard Ryan Rishaug and Jason Strudwick talking last night, saying that if they had to move out a player for salary, they thought it might be Foegele. And I'm utterly perplexed. I remain utterly perplexed at that talk. I mean, after this trade, I think it's highly unlikely that, there was a possibility that you could have done like a Foegele for Henrique trade, because you might think that Henrique will help your team more than Foegele will in this year's playoffs, and they're both on expiring contracts. And maybe that could have been some kind of trade. But listen, Warren Foegele, again, has the same level of even strength scoring as Pavel Buchnevich and Tyler Toffoli and all these players. He's better than Elias Lindholm. All these players, and Jake Gensel, that have been talked about. He's right there with them. This is over the last 2 seasons. This isn't a blip. 5-on-5. At 5-on-5. And who's ever coming in isn't playing on the power play. They're not breaking up their top 5 on their power play. So that's what matters, is their 5-on-5 scoring.
100%.
I'm still perplexed, Bruce. I don't know what to make of people's. Other than Warren Foegele is the most underrated player in the National Hockey League right now. That's what I would have to say.
I think people have they've compartmentalized the guy as he is what he is. He's a third line winger. He's a plumber. He'll pound one in once in a while, but it's usually by accident, but you look at the numbers and you realize that all of his scoring is done at 5-on-5. And you can look at these other guys and say, well, he's got, Buchnevich has got 26 goals or whatever. Yeah, but 8 or 9 of them are on the power play. And if you look at his point scoring at 5-on-5, it's no different than Foegele. And sure, Fogel's played some with Draisaitl, and in the last 2 years he's excelled with Draisaitl, really put up nice numbers with Leon. I'd rather have that guy, frankly. And rather than choosing between Foegele and Henrique, I'd rather have both guys. When you're talking about depth, player in, player out doesn't really improve your depth. So my preference would be to keep. They only have a small handful of guys in this class. Three players that are somewhere between $2 and $5 million who don't have no trade clauses and so on. It's those 3 that you name, and they've been bandied about as players on the trade block all season long, really, because that's the only flexibility that the Oilers have. But
so here's some of the D-men available still, Bruce. I'll just go down. So there's Noah Hanifin at the top of the list.
Just got traded.
Oh, he did. Jake
Vegas Golden Knights got Hanifin.
Oh, what's the deal?
My son just sent me a WhatsApp text saying
fracking cheaters, Bruce. They are just the biggest pack of scheming cheaters I've ever seen in my life. I have no proof of that. That's just a speculation.
He's hearing anyways. He's
jeez.
Not done. He says. Yeah. Okay.
I am just entirely skeptical of the Vegas Golden Knights and their brilliant strategy the last 2 years.
In progress for sure, yeah. Mark Stone, eh? Sideshow Bob.
Yeah.
Some stuff keeps happening to him.
All right, so
on rakes.
So on the list now is Jacob Chychrun, Matt Dumba. Now that's a player I like. I like Matt Dumba. I know not everybody does. I think he might be an upgrade over CC. He's a right D. He earns $3.9 million a year on a expiring contract. So what if the Oilers were? I don't know if the Oilers would move CC and for Dumba, like CC and a pick for Dumba. I doubt it, but I think they like Cody CC, and I like Cody CC too when he's at the top of his game. Other defensemen on the TSN list include Joel Edmondson from Washington, Alexander Carrier from Nashville, who again is a long shot. Nick Seeler's been traded, I think. Zach Bogosian's still out there. That's the kind of player that the Oilers might get because he's on an $850,000 contract. He won't cost much.
Veteran right shot.
Man. Yeah, that's David Savard's still out there, $3.5 million, so he's more expensive, and I don't think he'd work. Eric Johnson, a right D from Buffalo, $3.25 million. Andrew Peak, a 25-year-old right D from Columbus. There's Kulak's name. He's 40th on the list. So anyway, we'll see who it is. I do like, what do you think of Dumba? I like the player, and he certainly is a third pairing guy. I mean.
Oh, yeah, he's more than that. He's a very proactive player, and he makes mistakes, and he makes good plays. And on his good nights, he's excellent. And on other nights, you wonder if he's, present.
So he's Dennis Grabishkov, Bruce, exactly. 95% strong player, 5% secret agent for the other team.
Yes, per Tom Barrett.
From Tom Barrett's great line.
His great description of him.
And maybe that's what Grabishkov is.
Hope you're still listening to the podcast, Tom.
Hockey Reference. Let me see how much he's been playing. Yeah, he's not a big guy, but he sure hits like a...
Oh, yeah, he's a feisty guy. I interviewed him years ago for the Cult of Hockey when he was in Red Deer and was going to be a high draft pick, which he was. Was he 7th or 8th overall, I think, in his year?
So for the last 8 years, Bruce, he's played more than 20 minutes, average more than 20 minutes a game. This year, he's right at 20 on the nose, which is kind of the lowest of the last 8 years. But he's still hit. He's throwing a ton of hits, more hits this year than ever before. He blocks about a shot and a half a game. So anyway, we'll see what they do. Most likely, it'll be a player like Zach Bogosian. So Vegas got Hanifin.
Sounds like it's in the works anyway. And all these trades I've heard where these insiders, this one's Ryan Leslie of Sportsnet, where these insiders say it sounds like it's actually happening as opposed to spitballing. It sometimes takes 15 or 30 minutes for the trade call to come through, but
yeah,
I've heard in recent days they happen.
I better go to any other details on that?
In terms of what they're giving up, no.
What do you think they're going to give up? That's an interesting. They don't have a lot.
No.
But, I never really liked Noah Hanifin a ton until his last game against the Oilers. He suddenly looked like a
sensation.
A red ball of fire. Yeah, he's been kind of, so he's a lefty. I wonder if they're worried about injury on their blue line there. Because, yeah, I'm not seeing. Let me just go to the NHL coverage on Twitter.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Several people are
anything
saying
else?
This.
Anything else that Holland said, Bruce?
Vegas has entered the chat. Just that he'd given Sam Gagner a couple days to be home with his family, but then he'd be reporting to Bakersfield. And for sure, he would be playing for Bakersfield at Abbotsford next Tuesday, which is when Holland himself will be in the building evaluating Edmonton's minor league options that they have. And otherwise, it was just, fairly predictable, Holland boilerplate of, he's going to be making calls and looking for people, but he didn't want to commit to saying, I have to do anything. He said the price is right. And he's just being coy and saying the right things mostly. Chris Johnson confirming.
Elliot Friedman has announced it apparently on the air.
Drieger and Weeks confirming.
Here's what Elliot Friedman has to say. So we'll see, Bruce.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a done deal, obviously.
Yeah, they're all saying he's going to Vegas. Well, they sure know how to weaponize LTIR space. I'll give them that. And that's all it means. I mean, maybe Stone won't be back for the beginning of the playoffs, but either way, they've used his cap space to add two pretty big pieces now.
Total BS. But anyway, those are the rules. Them's the rules. Them's are the rules. So headline Bruce, Vegas just got softer.
Okay, let's see what Chris Johnson's got. Is there anything different? Can confirm Noah Hanifin is heading to Vegas, and still no word on what's going out. But that's typical.
It'll be nothing.
The big pieces, yeah. They'll send Calgary a 4th round pick and a
first in a year or two.
Yeah, a guy from the minor league team, and Calgary will retain 50%. And
oh well, such is life. You know, It's not easy to win the Stanley Cup, and they're going for it. I have to give them full credit to Vegas for within the rules, whatever the rules are, maximizing their advantage and going for the Stanley Cup again. Like, brilliant. This is brilliant work by Las Vegas. And I might not like it, and I might be really super skeptical about it, but this is aggressive and brilliant work by the Las Vegas Golden Knights, and full credit to their management team for doing it.
Yeah. Which defenseman even comes out of the lineup? My goodness, they've got a...
Well, maybe they've got some injuries maybe there's more injuries, than we. They're not doing too well recently, so it could be any number of them.
No, through 12 games, they were 11-0-1.
Maybe Whiteside comes out.
Yeah, I don't think
they haven't been happy with him. I was reading some. Yeah, I've been reading some Vegas fans.
I've always seen that guy good, White Cloud.
Yeah.
And him and Haig was like the third pairing from hell when you're playing against them. They were just fantastic against Edmonton, I thought, last year. And that was their third pairing. Anyway, they've certainly got some good, strong veteran players on the D, and they just added another one.
So let's just have a look.
And they got Martinez. They got Theodore. They got Theodore. They got Pietrangelo.
So White Cloud's played
in the top 4.
Yeah, White Cloud's played 46 games. Ben Hutton 31, Caden Korzak 26, Nicholas Haig 54, Braden McNabb 62, Alex Martinez 45, Shea Theodore 27, and Alex Pietrangelo 57. So the only player who's been healthy all year has been Braden McNabb. Everyone else has been had some injuries. So they have got a really solid defense core, Bruce. Really, it's going to be hard. Listen, all the more likely you're going to see McDavid and Draisaitl on the same line against Vegas this year. I'm going to suggest, and the Henrique trade is all the more necessary in light of the arms race going on. We'll see. Maybe Ken Holland is going to suddenly do more than anyone thought, including Ken Holland. Possibility. I doubt it, but.
Yeah, anyway, Henrique, he pencils in all the way as a middle 6 with Edmonton, second or third line, and I think he's capable of both. So
yeah. Well, Bruce, any other thoughts, or do you want to leave it there?
I think there's a lot going down, lots of trades today. I've been working a lot on the Henrique and Carrick one, so not even looking. Like, I've heard the names wash over it. I haven't really analyzed what's going on other teams, but there's it really picked up today after pretty quiet several weeks leading into the deadline, really. Just the Tanev trade, not much else that was real big, and all of a sudden today, wham, a bunch started falling like dominoes.
Well, Bruce, let's leave it there. Thanks for talking today.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast. All right.
shoot me the code, because I'm going to have to massage my post slightly, because I mentioned the embedded podcast in the chatter about Henrique, and when I put the new podcast in, I'll have to reword that a little bit.
Do you want me to just to do that for you? All of it?
Oh, I have to change a paragraph a little bit, so
I can do that, Bruce. I can do. Why don't you just change that paragraph right now, and I'll put the new podcast in.
Okay.
When I get it ready, okay?
Sure.
So you can just you can change it right now and then head out.
Yeah,
I may do with all of this news. I may do a Twitter reacts to to everything that's gone on today. So
yeah, that's not the worst idea.
Yeah.
I'm still working on the segment review, and I'll plug it in somewhere, because it has to fit wherever it fits. It has to be a regular
Well, how about
thing.
put it up tomorrow morning as the game day?
Okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Awesome.
Thanks, Bruce. Talk to you later.
All right.